Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the three-headed dog. That is Kerberos the dog, and this symbolizes LDAP, and this is, we know, the elephant. And just a few words about me. I am part of organizing the Copenhagen Postgres user group, and we're much smaller than you guys. When we have meetups, we're 6 people. So this is quite a crowd. That's great. And I live on the other side of the pond, and I work in a big Swedish company actually called Sweco that some of you may know, in one of their digital services departments. And I've worked with databases and infrastructure and development and high performance computing in the past. These slides will be available here. I announced it earlier in the meetup group, not realizing that this was private at the time. Now it should be open. Yes. Normally people say don't do a live demo of anything. I'm gonna do the complete opposite. So I'm gonna hopefully do a lot of live demo here, and I'm really praying that it works. Yeah. And actually, I've even set up a little demo environment that that you are welcome to log into, as long as you don't delete too much. So there are 3 virtual servers running in DigitalOcean. These 3, and you can log in with I didn't write that. Yeah, user guest, and then the password that is here. I had hoped there was a big drawing board, but that's the password. So Godot was here with zeros instead of O's. So feel free to log in, and when you have logged in, you can also sudo to become root. So that's fully it's very open. Okay, so many of you guys that work with databases, you probably do web stuff and other things where one application speaks to one database, and it's pretty much the only thing that happens. But some of you may also work in enterprise environments where you have maybe data warehouses, data marts, or even operational databases where real people log into databases and do work. I'm sure some of you also are subject to various kinds of regulations and compliance, and maybe you're also part of a big organizations where new colleagues come and go, and you need to make sure that people, when they leave the company, that they don't linger around in all the different systems, and when new people are enrolled, that they can quickly get into the systems that they need to work in. And this is where single sign-on is interesting. And with Postgres and other databases, the way to do that can be centralized account and password management. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And there are a few assumptions and practicalities. I assume a situation where there is some kind of Active Directory that is not necessarily a Microsoft Active Directory. Could be, for example, as I will demonstrate today, a Samba Active Directory, which is surprisingly equal to Microsoft's Active Directory. And it could also be, if you're in a pure Linux environment, you would probably choose free IPA instead of an Active Directory. So it's a combination of user directory, an LDAP database, and Kerberos for ticketing. This demo will work on some Ubuntu servers, and you should know that some of the things I'm going to show, things are a little bit different in the Red Hat family of Linux distributions. Unfortunately, you can refer back to this later if you ever get into a situation where you want to know this. Yeah, so there are actually 3 parts of this. So what I'm going to maybe spend most time on today is the first part where when you approach the database, you need to be database needs to know who you are and validate who you are. So that's the authentication, credential validation part of the situation. And then when you have logged into the database, there's an aspect where your user needs to be mapped into Postgres roles. So your user in the Active Directory needs to be mapped into Postgres' rather strange role system. Postgres has a very flexible user management and group management system called roles that you may have heard of. Actually, it's so flexible that it actually can become quite complex. So when your user has then been mapped into a role, then we're maybe in the land of developers and more than DBAs perhaps. So that's where your table grants and your schema ownerships and all that comes into play. So there are actually three parts of this. I'm going to spend most time here, a little bit here, not anything here. Then there's different levels of single sign-on. The ideal situation is that the end user that needs to do analysis logs into her PC when she shows up in the morning and just works all day and does not have to be confronted with password dialogues. That would be the ideal situation that we're striving for. But there is also a semi-single sign-on situation where you at least you're being asked for passwords and maybe several times a day, but at least you can use the same username and password across different servers. So that's what I'm gonna be calling semi-single sign-on today. Okay. Now there are different kinds of login technologies that you can make use of in Postgres, and Kerberos, also sometimes called GSS. That's the way you get the full single sign-on, where you can work all day without having to prove yourself, other than when you start your PC in the morning. And it's very robust because Kerberos. I'm not going to go into details with Kerberos, but it's a little bit like if you have a cookie in a web browser. You can think of it as a signed cookie that you get from an authority, and then you can present that signed cookie to the different systems, and they can say, this has been signed by the authority, so that's fine. Come on in. So sometimes the authentication doesn't even need to involve the Active Directory server. So due to these tickets, it can be very, very robust. It can work even though your domain controller might be down for a little while. You can probably still work. And also, a nice part of it is that you don't need to work with TLS certificates. TLS certificates is, I think, you're using more and more of our time, and that's just how it is. But you can actually get away with not dealing with certificate management with Kerberos. But then, on the other hand, you have some rather tricky handling of key tab files that are sort of binary secret stores. And a problem is that some Postgres client software does not support this kind of authentication. Then we have the other single sign-on solutions. One I'm not going to talk about at all. Maybe I should have, but I don't see people using it. There's a system called Radius that's sometimes used for Wi-Fi authentication and so on, and maybe it's being used other places that I just don't know of. But I'm not going to go into that. And then there are two other interesting technologies that we can talk about. So, assuming that you have this enterprise setup where you have a database server that is joined to an Active Directory, and you have application servers also joined, and your PCs also joined into the Active Directory, then if it's a Linux server, it's probably using something called SSD to join into the Active Directory. And since you also already have that, a lot of things have already been set up for you. So when you log in, you get a Kerberos ticket automatically, and it's nice. And you can actually use SSD with something called PAM to very easily set up authentication. I'm not going to spend time on this because actually I thought this was very nice until I actually measured how how fast it goes. It's extremely slow. So I did a micro benchmark of connection times, and so this is the peer connection time where you use a Unix domain socket on the server itself. They can probably not be any faster than that. So Kerberos is just as quick, and then there's something called ident that you can also use, almost as quick. But then things start getting slow, and especially this PAM solution it's very bad. So my plan was to talk a lot about this until I saw these numbers, and I've never seen these numbers before, so it's actually quite interesting, I think. But one good thing about SSD and PAM, on top of it being easy, is that it has the same robustness to it, because the SSD daemon that sits on the servers, it can cache some knowledge about authentication. So, but then we have what probably a lot of people talk about when they talk about single sign-on, LDAP, which is faster than SSD, as we saw. There's a very troublesome certificate handling. I think LDAP has always been extremely cumbersome. I don't know why. It's just either it's me, but I really struggle with it a lot, and I think it's only gotten worse because it has been. The certificate handling part of it has become very much stricter lately. I don't know. It always causes me trouble, but when it works, it's quite stable. What about LDAP? You need to have LDAP servers that are always around. Otherwise, you cannot log in. So it's not as robust as some of the others. Yeah, that was it. So I'm gonna dive into Kerberos. When you read about it in the documentation, you will be told that you need to reach out to your IT department and get a file with representing something called an SPN, service principal name, and you get that from the IT department. And as soon as I hear that, I think, 3 weeks of delay, lots of struggle, and lots of questions to be answered, and so on. So that's not very attractive. But the idea is you get the IT department sets up something called an SPN that is coupled to either a computer object in the Active Directory or some kind of user object, so typically one that does not have password expiry. So the SPN is coupled to an object in the LDAP database, and as a result of that, you get a binary file that you then put into the database server where Postgres can read it, and then you tell Postgres to use Kerberos, also called GSS, and then you access it. So that's by the book. That's what most documentation says you should do. But I'm going to present some other tricks that you may find useful instead. What I've found is that you can actually, as long as your database server is joined into the AD, it actually has some built-in privileges due to its being joined to the Active Directory. It's allowed to set up SPNs itself within a little namespace that it has. So the computer object that your server has, it can set up some SPNs. I'm gonna show you, and this means that you don't have to work with the IT department. That's a big bonus, unless of course you are the IT department. And then you don't need to transfer any files either, because there's another tool that is called MSKT util that you can use to set up these services in also called SPNs, and in return get the key back, and it puts it in something called the key tab of the server, and you can then see it. But then, and we're gonna talk about that, Postgres needs to be able to read those key tabs, and that's a problem. And there's some solutions to it. Okay, so this is where I pray that things work, and also that you can see what's going on. So I'm here. I'm logged into the database server that I've set up. Yeah, I think you can see it probably. And so using this server, I'm gonna set up this SPN that I talked about in using my computer object, and I'm gonna verify that I actually got it, and then I'm gonna present some ways that we can make it available for Postgres so that it can be used. First, I'm gonna become a root, and that's very easy on this system. So, of course, these servers, they break a lot of normal rules, also being available like this on the internet and so on. But that I'm not so afraid today about that. When I look on this server down in etc, it has a file called Kerberos file 5 key tab that is only readable by root. That's important, and it's not very. It's hard to read, and so that's, you may have seen it before. We can peek a little bit into it. Yeah, so we can see now it's a little bit more readable, but still not very readable. There is a tool for reading such files, and it's called klist. And I've asked it to tell me what's inside that key tab. So this is my key tab, and then if you see a system that has been running for longer, you will see that there is different versions of these keys, and you're going to see that there's something that I don't know much about, but there's some host services and some other stuff. But there's nothing here called Postgres, and there needs to be a service here called Postgres for us to have this working. Okay, so then there's a trick where where did it go? Here. Yeah, I'm gonna use the key that is sort of built into the computer account. So this is what it looks like. So now I have sort of I have assumed that the key that is somewhere on the system representing this computer object, and now I can use that key to write this command. So this command reaches out to the Active Directories and says, I would like to set up a new service, a new SPN, and as a result of that, I would like to get the resulting keys. Oops. What was it? Yeah, that's the syntax, and the service is for service, and now it's supposedly talking to the Active Directory server, trying to get that service introduced into. Yes, it worked, and now we can see if we look at the key tab again. We can now see that there are some services that were not there before here. And we can see that there's a new version now of the key tab. Before there was only 2. Now there's a lot of versions with 3. And this is something with encryption algorithms and other stuff that I don't know much about. Okay, so that's good. The server has now sort of, we are now represented in the Active Directory server, and on this etc Kerberos key tab binary file, we have now some keys that reflect that. Now Postgres needs to be able to read this. There are different ways of doing that. One way could be to make the Kerberos 5 key tab readable by Postgres. You'll probably hear people saying that should never be done and so on. But if the server is only serving Postgres, you could argue that it would be okay, I'd say. you could set it up so that maybe it would have instead of this permission set, it would maybe have read for the Postgres user. Not so dangerous, but still that you might get compliance folks and such people. They might start chasing you if you do that. No, they will not, because they will never see this. But there might be people who would take offense with doing it this way. So another way is to use a very bad tool called KTutil, where you read in this key tab file and then you delete everything that you don't want, and then you save it in a new file for Postgres. That can work. The problem is that this computer object, it will renew itself in the AD every third month, I think. And suddenly these version numbers will be larger in real life on the Active Directory server, and then the file that you gave Postgres is no longer valid. So things work fine for 3 months or 6 months, and then suddenly things stop working and people have no idea why. So that's not a good situation. And you probably forgot everything about it after 6 months. So I found something called GSS proxy that I had hoped could be used for this, but it seems that it only is used for web server, for sort of presenting part of a key tab to web servers. So that doesn't seem to be a good solution. So I wrote a tool that I'm going to show. That I call key tab mux. And what it does is that it has an example configuration. Where you can tell it that you have an input file that is your system key tab, and you want some outputs. In this case, only one output, saying that any key that starts with Postgres needs to be copied over to this file, and the resulting file should not be readable by any but root in Postgres. So that's, yeah, it says nothing. That means that things went well. So now if we look into the default location for Postgres' Kerberos file, here it is. We have this is UTC timestamp. We have a recent file here that the tool wrote for us. And we can also put it into a service mode. And then if I, it's probably it made a new copy now. Here. So it's from this timestamp now. If I touch the master key file, key tab file, it should make a new version because it has been updated, and it seems to work. So I proposed as actually a way of solving this, and you can read more about it in the material. There's a link in the show in the slides. Okay, so now we have a key tab file that Postgres can actually use, and it will be kept up to date when there's a need for it, so we can actually trust it. Next step, I'm going to go back to the slides to see that I'm not overlooking anything. Next thing, we need to tell Postgres to use Kerberos for authentication. There is Postgres two interesting parameters in PostgreSQL.conf. There is the path to the file, and this is the default one on Debian style installations. And then there is a parameter that is by default off, I think, meaning that normally it doesn't handle the usernames in a case insensitive way. I prefer I think in practical situations, it's nice to treat usernames in case insensitive ways. I'm not sure it makes much of a difference. So that's one way, and yeah, they need to tell Postgres that now we are to use Kerberos. Another way is that Postgres has another configuration file that is directly targeted at access control, and there you need to say that when clients approach it using this strange protocol, and there's something about some host they come from and what database and so on, then Postgres should use the GSS authentication method. And there's a non-standard parameter that I recommend, stating that people don't have to write the whole username. That would be Troels at demo.troels.arvindk. So I could just use Troels or username or whatever it is. I see it has cut off some of my text here, but I'm also telling it what domain it is supposed to interpret it as if people don't specify a realm. You can also write something else. If you dive into the details, you can read about something called host no GSS blah blah blah. And I've just learned that if you do that, you cannot combine you cannot combine LDAP and Kerberos. That's a minor detail. You don't need to recall this, but you may run into it. Yeah, there's some. Maybe I should also demonstrate that it actually works. So if I now log into my DB client. Maybe I need to copy paste it. Oh. Something not right. That's why. Thank you. That explains a lot. It's not particularly quick, but now I'm logged in, and if I run the klist command as this user, I can see I have a ticket from the system, and I now hope that I can log into the database. Yes, I can, but, and this highlights the next topic, my user does not exist in the database. So this is a problem. Postgres does not automatically create accounts when you log in, and that's a bummer. And that's maybe the most annoying part of such a setup. But if I then on the server create such a user, hopefully I can log in then. So this user, AD user, that I'm going to use already exists in the AD, but not in the database yet. Well, okay. So actually, I got confused because you need to read the details. The problem was that I didn't specify a database that actually existed. So what I need to do now is I create a database for that user. And let's see if things work better now. It is really slow, this system. But I get it for free. It's a free month of DigitalOcean hosting here. Okay. Oh, so now I could log in. Yeah. No password entered, and I can see that it says something about GSS. So that's how we like it. Okay. Back to the presentation. Yeah, there is some software does not support Kerberos for DBeaver that some of you may know. You need to use the paid version. Maybe that's fair enough. My favorite programming languages, most used, Crate, does not support it, but there are other crates that do, particularly one called Diesel. That is also nice. I believe there is something called Pi 3000 or Pi 8000 library that doesn't support it either. I remember that being a problem in a previous job, that they had to change what Python database library they used. So, yeah. So, I'm about to leave the Kerberos part of it, and actually we are short on time. But still, is there any comments or questions, or have some of you used this this kind of Kerberos or LDAP or something like this before with Postgres? No. Okay. Yeah. So we cannot always use Kerberos for various reasons. One of them being not all software supports it. So another way to do it is to use LDAP. And you can read about that in the documentation. And LDAP is famous for having very long strings of keys and so on. So this is one big line that needs to go into this server's database server's HBA-conf file with a lot of stuff. And what it says is that database needs to be able to log into the AD using some kind of service account for doing LDAP lookups to see if people exist in the database, and it's gonna, because it's an Active Directory system, it's gonna use a special LDAP property called SAM-account name, and it's gonna use some kind of secret for that. So in this setup, Postgres becomes an LDAP client to be able to look people up to see if they're already there. And that opens a can of worms. You wouldn't think how much trouble you can have with it, but first of all, now you need to trust your AD server certificate. And normally in your daily life, you may have the curse of certificates, but you probably not. Normally, you probably don't have to deal with Active Directory servers, domain controller certificates, but now you do. And that's not so nice. Yeah, so LDAP has become more and more strict about access. There used to be a system called StartTLS that was sort of easy to deal with. Now everything has to be encrypted even before things start getting sort of secret. So you just have to brace yourself. You can grab. I found a way. You can also find it on the web. You can find a way to connect to the LDAP port of the direct domain controller, and then you can get something out, and you can confirm it into a PM format. And then, given that this is a Debian-derived system, you put it into this path in a new file, and then you run this system command. So now your system trusts the certificate of the domain controller. That's not so bad, actually. The problem is I've seen that these certificates that you get that way, they don't seem to last very long. So actually there's another certificate, namely the certificate authority that was used to create this certificate. You can also grab that, but that's more complicated, but you can grab it. I think you can as far as I recall, you can grab it using some LDAP searches. into the AD. So that now you can have the certificate authorities certificate on your database server instead, and that typically lasts for decades. So that's probably much more interesting. But this is the easy way, and you can get going. I am running out of time, or what? There's no pizza yet, so yeah. So I'm gonna show you what it looks like on this demonstration database server now. I'm gonna remove the Kerberos stuff, and then I'm gonna concentrate on LDAP. That was the long string we talked about before, and it's the usual password I use all over the place for this demonstration. So now I tell Postgres server to use these credentials, and so I restart the database, and now single sign-on won't work with Kerberos anymore. And now I can try again to log in from my client, and this time I'm being presented with a password prompt because it's not real single sign-on anymore. Hopefully things still work. It's surprisingly slow, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. It's a good thing we're not using SSD. Yeah, I think it worked. Yes. No? Because it's still saying GSS, what on earth is going on here? I must have done something wrong. So I'm going to try again. Yes. Okay, so now we have a different kind of connection. This does not say LDAP, but that's how it presents itself. Yeah, so we got in. It can work, definitely, and in many situations this is probably what you're going to end up with for various reasons. And that's fine. Yeah, it's just something that if you ever get into this and you get into trouble, there's some different stuff that you can. First of all, it's always nice to see that LDAP search, the LDAP search tool is working for you, because if LDAP search is not working for you, then Postgres does not stand a chance either. And for that, you can work with the LDAP configuration file that the path is different for Red Hat systems. Some normal stuff here. But there are also some black magic that sometimes works. And I mean, I've seen these things make a huge difference, and I cannot explain why. And you can read about it, and you can spend a long time. I think it's getting better. Maybe it was more a thing of the past, but yeah, you just need to know that there is a potential for black magic that you can dive into. Now, the final part, the second part of this big chain that I showed in the beginning. Now we have covered this part. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Yeah. So, you saw that things did not work if there was not a database user that matched the account that I logged in as. So how do you then make sure that your database instance has these users, these roles as Postgres calls them? Well, I'm betting lots of places you just have scripts that do it. You set up some scripts that pull out some usernames from the AD, and then you You set up some cron jobs that handle that. But of course, there's some people who have tried to make it more bulletproof and more advanced. And there are 2 different tools that you can choose between. And one is an old Ruby-based one, and there's a new, more shiny Python one that I had never been able to make work. I have tried for a long time, but so this one is the one I recommend currently. Yes. And for things to work with this tool that I'm going to show, I first need to set up a little role in the Postgres database that can be sort of the building block for whatever we're going to put into the database of other roles. So we're going to have a little tree starting with something called LDAP groups that this tool by default uses, and then you're going to put things from your LDAP server underneath that role. So I need to make sure that LDAP groups exists. So now we have that, and then we can have a look at some configuration. This tool has some YAML configuration that you can read about, and I did not spend enough time on this, so this is going to be a clumsy demonstration because this is not something that would work well in real life. But the idea is that you provide some parts of the LDAP tree that you want to map into users, and it can be done with various filters on it, and you can make transitions on the server, on the usernames, and you can do a lot of stuff. I think it's surprisingly hard to get to run, again, because this tool uses LDAP that I don't like so much, and it has strange connection problems often. But in the end, I got this to work, and I'm not going to dive into it because I cannot talk much about it. But of course, you can read about it on its web page. So we have this configuration file, and now, because I'm working as the Postgres user, I should then be able to just see what's in the database now of users. Is it? I'm trying to get this list of users, isn't it? Yeah. So I have very few users in this database instance. Let's see what happens when now I run this. This tool, and in the classic Unix style, when it doesn't say anything, it's very introvert. When it doesn't say anything, things are perfect. So now let's look what we have. Not much, actually. It's because I changed it in the last moment. Because in my first attempts, it suddenly had a lot of 80 system accounts, like domain admins and other stuff that obviously don't belong in the database. But at least it got this DB users group that I have created before in the LDAP database. So it's not very convincing, but something worked here, and this is probably the tool that I would use if I didn't use homegrown scripts as things stand. Yeah. So and then the rest is about grants of tables and user-defined function views, all that you can then map into those roles, and that's quite well known by a lot of us, I think. Yeah. So any questions or comments? Is this something you think you can use, or? Okay, so thanks for listening again. Yeah, there's you can find stuff here that is going to be in this. It's on the meetup page. There's a link to here, and you can see the slides. And you can also, I don't know why you would want that, but you can also see the Ansible code that I used to set up this demo environment. The reason you might want to do it is that some of the code that I showed is sort of represented in those playbooks. Yeah. Yes, thank you.